Hindustani classical music is the Hindustani or North Indian style of Indian classical music. The style is sometimes called North Indian classical music or Shāstriya Sangīt or Klāsikī Mausīqī. It is a tradition that originated in Vedic ritual chants and has been evolving since the 12th century CE, in North India and to some extent in Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Nepal and Pakistan. Today, it is one of the two subgenres of Indian classical music, the other being Carnatic music, the classical tradition of South India. Characteristics: the tradition was born out of a cultural synthesis of several musical traditions, the Vedic chant tradition, dating back to more than 3,000 years ago, various external influences from the 12th century AD from when it started to evolve, as well as various native folk traditions prevalent in the subcontinent region. It is traditional for performers who have reached a distinguished level of achievement to be awarded titles of respect. Hindus are usually referred to as Pandit and Muslims as Ustad. An aspect of Hindustani music going back to Sufi times is the tradition of religious neutrality. Muslim ustads may sing compositions in praise of Hindu deities, and vice versa. Around the 12th century, Hindustani classical music diverged from what eventually came to be identified as Carnatic classical music. The central notion in both these systems is that of a melodic mode or raga, sung to a rhythmic cycle or tala. The tradition dates back to the ancient Samaveda, which deals with the norms for chanting of srutis or hymns such as the Rig Veda. These principles were refined in the musical treatises Natya Shastra, Bharata, and Dattailam. In medieval times, the melodic systems were fused with ideas from Persian music, particularly through the influence of Sufi composers like Amir Khusro, and later in the Mughal courts. Noted composers such as Tansen flourished, along with religious groups like the Vaishnavites. After the 16th century, the singing styles diversified into different gharanas patronized in different princely courts. Around 1900, Vishnu Narayan Bhatt Khan consolidated the musical structures of Hindustani classical music, called ragas, into a number of thats. Indian classical music has 7 basic notes with 5 interspersed half notes, resulting in a 12-note scale. Unlike the 12-note scale in Western music, the bass frequency of the scale is not fixed, and internal gaps may also vary. However, with the gradual replacement of the sarangi by the harmonium, an equal-tempered scale is increasingly used. The performance is set to a melodic pattern called a raga, characterized in part by specific ascent and descent sequences, which may not be identical. Other characteristics include king and queen notes and characteristic phrases. In addition, each raga has its natural register and portamento rules. Performances are usually marked by considerable improvisation within these norms. History: music was first formalized in India in connection with preserving the Shruti texts, primarily the 4 Vedas, which are seen as a Purusha. Not only was the text important, but also the manner in which they had been enunciated by the immortals. Prosody and chanting were thus of great importance, and were enshrined in the 2 Vedangas called Shiksha and Chandas. These remained a key part of the Brahmanic educational system till modern times. The formal aspects of the chant are delineated in the Samaveda, with certain aspects, for example a relation of chanting to meditation, elaborated in the Chandogya Upanishad. Priests involved in these ritual chants were called samans, and a number of ancient musical instruments such as the conch, lute, flute, trumpets and horns were associated with this and later practices of ritual singing. Sanskritic tradition the Samaveda outlined the ritual chants for singing the verses of the Rig Veda, particularly for offerings of soma. It proposed a tonal structure consisting of 7 notes, which were named, in descending order, Krusht, Pratham, Dvitiya, Tritiya, Chaturth, Mandra and Uttasvara. These refer to the notes of a flute, which was the only fixed frequency instrument. This is why the second note is called Pratham. Music is dealt with extensively in the Valmiki Ramayana. Narada is an accomplished musician, as is Ravana. Saraswati with her Vayana is the goddess of music. Gandharvas are presented as spirits who are musical masters, and the Gandharva style looks to music primarily for pleasure, accompanied by the Soma Rasa. In the Vishnudharmatara Purana, the Naga king Ashvatara asks to know the svaras from Saraswati. The most important text on music in the ancient canon is Bharata's Natya Shastra, composed around the 3rd century CE. The Natya Shastra deals with the different modes of music, dance, and drama, and also the emotional responses they are expected to evoke. The scale is described in terms of 22 microtones, which can be combined in clusters of 4, 3, or 2 to form an octave. While the term raga is articulated in the Natya Shastra, it finds a clearer expression in what is called jati in the Dattayilam, a text composed shortly after or around the same time as Natya Shastra. The Dattayilam is focused on Gandharva music and discusses scales, defining a tonal framework called grama in terms of 22 microtonal intervals comprising 1 octave. It also discusses various arrangements of the notes, the permutations and combinations of note sequences, and alankara or elaboration. Dattayilam categorizes melodic structure into 18 groups called jati, which are the fundamental melodic structures similar to the raga. The names of the jatis reflect regional origins, for example Andhra and Audikya. Music also finds mention in a number of texts from the Gupta period. Kalidasa mentions several kinds of Vienna, as well as percussion instruments, the flute and conch. Music also finds mention in Buddhist and Jain texts from the earliest periods of the Christian era. Narada's Sanjita Makaranda treatise, from about 1100 CE, is the earliest text where rules similar to those of current Hindustani classical music can be found. Narada actually names and classifies the system in its earlier form before the Persian influences introduced changes in the system. Jayadeva's Gita Govinda from the 12th century was perhaps the earliest musical composition sung in the classical tradition called Ashtapadi music. In the 13th century, Sahangadeva composed the Sanjita Raishnakara, which has names such as the Charuskha Todi, revealing an influx of ideas from Islamic culture. This text is the last to be mentioned by both the Carnatic and the Hindustani traditions and is often thought to date the divergence between the two. Medieval period, Persian influence the advent of Islamic rule under the Delhi Sultanate and later the Mughal Empire over northern India caused considerable cultural interchange. Increasingly, musicians received patronage in the courts of the new rulers, who in their turn, started taking increasing interest in local music forms. While the initial generations may have been rooted in cultural traditions outside India, they gradually adopted many aspects from their kingdoms which retained the traditional Hindu culture. This helped spur the fusion of Hindu and Muslim ideas to bring forth new forms of musical synthesis like Qawwali and Khyal. The most influential musician of the Delhi Sultanate period was Amir Khusrau, sometimes called the father of modern Hindustani classical music. A composer in Persian, Turkish, Arabic, as well as Braj Bhasha, he is credited with systematizing many aspects of Hindustani music, and also introducing several ragas such as Yaman Kalyan, Zilaf and Sarpada. He created the Qawwali genre, which fuses Persian melody and beat on a Drupad-like structure. A number of instruments were also introduced in his time. Amir Khusrau is sometimes credited with the origins of the Khyal form, but the record of his compositions do not appear to support this. The compositions by the court musician Sadarang in the court of Muhammad Shah bear a closer affinity to the modern Khyal. They suggest that while Khyal already existed in some form, Sadarang may have been the father of modern Khyal. Much of the musical forms innovated by these pioneers merged with a Hindu tradition, composed in the popular language of the people in the work of composers like Kabir or Nanak. This can be seen as part of a larger Bhakti tradition, which remained influential across several centuries. Notable figures include Jayadeva, Vidyapati, Chandidas, and Mirabai. As the Mughal Empire came into closer contact with Hindus, especially under Jalal-ud-Din Akbar, music and dance also flourished. In particular, the musician Tansen introduced a number of innovations, including ragas and particular compositions. Legend has it that upon his rendition of a nighttime raga in the morning, the entire city fell under a hush and clouds gathered in the sky, and that he could light fires by singing the raga Deepak, which is supposed to be composed of notes in high octaves. At the royal house of Gwalior, Raja Mansingh Tomar also participated in the shift from Sanskrit to the local idiom as the language for classical songs. He himself penned several volumes of compositions on religious and secular themes, and was also responsible for the major compilation, the Mankatul, which outlined the major forms of music prevalent at the time. In particular, the musical form known as Dhrupad saw considerable development in his court and remained a strong point of the Gwalior Gharana for many centuries. After the dissolution of the Mughal Empire, the patronage of music continued in smaller princely kingdoms like Awadh, Patiala, and Benares, giving rise to the diversity of styles that is today known as gharanas. Many musician families obtained large grants of land which made them self-sufficient, at least for a few generations. Meanwhile, the Bhakti and Sufi traditions continued to develop and interact with the different gharanas and groups. Modern era until the late 19th century, Hindustani classical music was imparted on a one-on-one basis through the Guru Shāstriya tradition. This system had many benefits, but also several drawbacks. In many cases, the Shāstriya had to spend most of his time serving as guru with the hope that the guru might teach him a cheese or two. In addition, the system forced the music to be limited to a small subsection of the Indian community. To a large extent it was limited to the palaces and dance halls. It was shunned by the intellectuals, avoided by the educated middle class, and in general looked down upon as a frivolous practice. Then a fortunate turn of events started the renaissance of Hindustani classical music. First, as the power of the Maharajas and Nawabs declined in early 20th century, so did their patronage. With the expulsion of Wajid Ali Shah to Calcutta after 1857, the Lucknowi musical tradition came to influence the music of Renaissance in Bengal, giving rise to the tradition of Rag Pradhan around the turn of the century. Raja Chakradhar Singh of Raga was the last of the modern-era Maharajas to patronize Hindustani classical musicians, singers and dancers. Also, at the turn of the century, two great stars emerged on the horizon, Vishnu Digambar Phalaskar and Vishnu Narayan Bhatkhand. Independent of each other, they spread Hindustani classical music to the masses in general, and the Marathi middle class in particular. These two gentlemen brought classical music to the masses by organizing music conferences, starting schools, teaching music in classrooms, and devising a standardized grading and testing system, and by standardizing the notation system. Vishnu Digambar Phalaskar emerged as a talented musician and organizer despite having been blinded at age 12. His books on music, as well as the Gandharva Mahavidyalaya music school that he opened in Lahore in 1901, helped foster a movement away from the closed Gharana system. Phalaskar's contemporary Vishnu Narayan Bhatkhand recognized the many rifts that had appeared in the structure of Indian classical music. He undertook extensive research visits to a large number of Gharanas, Hindustani as well as Carnatic, collecting and comparing compositions. Between 1909 and 1932, he produced the monumental four-volume work Hindustani Sangeetha, which suggested a transcription for Indian music, and described the many traditions in this notation. Finally, it consolidated the many musical forms of Hindustani classical music into a number of thoughts, subsequent to the Melakata system that reorganized Carnatic tradition in the 17th century. The ragas as they exist today were consolidated in this landmark work, although there are some inconsistencies and ambiguities in Bhatkhand's system. In modern times, the government-run All India Radio, Bangladesh Betar and Radio Pakistan helped to bring the artists to public attention, countering the loss of the patronage system. The first star was Gaur Jan, whose career was born out of Fred Gaisberg's first recordings of Indian music in 1902. With the advance of films and other public media, musicians started to make their living through public performances. As India was exposed to Western music, some Western melodies started merging with classical forms, especially in popular music. A number of gayukuls, such as that of Alauddin Khanat Mehar, flourished. In more modern times, corporate support has also been forthcoming, as at the ITC Sangīt Research Academy. Meanwhile, Hindustani classical music has become popular across the world through the influence of artists such as Ravi Shankar and Ali Akbar Khan. Principles of Hindustani music: the rhythmic organization is based on rhythmic patterns called tala. The melodic foundations are called ragas. One possible classification of ragas is into melodic modes, or parent scales, known as thats, under which most ragas can be classified based on the notes they use. Thats may consist of up to 7 scale degrees, or swara. Hindustani musicians name these pitches using a system called sargam, the equivalent of the Western movable do solfege. Za equals do, re equals re, ga equals mi, ma equals fa, pa equals sol, da equals la, ni equals ti, za equals do. Both systems repeated the octave. The difference between sargam and solfege is that re, ga, ma, da, and ni can refer to either natural, or altered flat, or sharp versions of their respective scale degrees. As with movable do solfege, the notes are heard relative to an arbitrary tonic that varies from performance to performance, rather than to fixed frequencies, as on a xylophone. The fine intonational differences between different instances of the same swara are called shrutis. The 3 primary registers of Indian classical music are mandra, madhur and tar. Since the octave location is not fixed, it is also possible to use provenances in mid-register for certain ragas. A typical rendition of Hindustani raga involves 2 stages, alap, or rhythmically free improvisation on the rules for the raga in order to give life to the raga and flesh out its characteristics. The alap is followed by a long slow-tempo improvisation in vocal music, or by the jod and jala in instrumental music. Bandish or gat, a fixed, melodic composition set in a specific raga, performed with rhythmic accompaniment by a tabla or pakhavij. There are different ways of systematizing the parts of a composition. For example, stali, the initial, rondo phrase or line of a fixed, melodic composition. Antara, the first body phrase or line of a fixed, melodic composition. Sanchari, the third body phrase or line of a fixed, melodic composition, seen more typically in Drupad bandishes, or arpog, the fourth and concluding body phrase or line of a fixed, melodic composition, seen more typically in Drupad bandishes. There are 3 variations of bandish, regarding tempo: vilamit bandish, a slow and steady melodic composition, usually in largo to adagio speeds. Madhyala bandish, a medium tempo melodic competition, usually set in andante to allegretto speeds. Drup bandish, a fast tempo melodic composition, usually set to allegretto speed or faster. Hindustani classical music is primarily vocal-centric, insofar as the musical forms were designed primarily for vocal performance, and many instruments were designed and evaluated as to how well they emulate the human voice. Types of compositions: the major vocal forms or styles associated with Hindustani classical music are Drupad, Khyal, and Tarana. Other forms include Damar, Trivat, Chaiti, Kajari, Tapa, Tap Khyal, Ashtapadis, Vimri, Dadra, Ghazal and Bhajan. These are folk or semi-classical or light classical styles, as they often do not adhere to the rigorous rules of classical music. Drupad. Drupad is an old style of singing, traditionally performed by male singers. It is performed with a tambura and a pakhawaj as instrumental accompaniments. The lyrics, some of which were written in Sanskrit centuries ago, are presently often sung in Brajasha, a medieval form of North and East Indian languages that was spoken in eastern India. The Rudra Veena, an ancient string instrument, is used in instrumental music in Drupad. Drupad music is primarily devotional in theme and content. It contains recitals in praise of particular deities. Drupad compositions begin with a relatively long and acyclic alap, where the syllables of the following mantra is recited. Om Anantam Taran Taranitwan Hariam Narayan, Anantariam Narayan. The alap gradually unfolds into more rhythmic jod and jala sections. These sections are followed by a rendition of bandish, with the pakhawaj as an accompaniment. The great Indian musician Tansen sang in the Drupad style. A lighter form of Drupad, called Damar, is sung primarily during the festival of Holi. Dhrupad was the main form of northern Indian classical music until 2 centuries ago, when it gave way to the somewhat less austere Khyal, a more free-form style of singing. Since losing its main patrons among the royalty in Indian princely states, Dhrupad risked becoming extinct in the first half of the 20th century. However, the efforts by a few proponents from the Degar family have led to its revival and eventual popularization in India and in the West. Some of the best-known vocalists who sing in the Dhrupad style are the members of the Degar lineage, including the senior Degar brothers, Nasir Moinuddin and Nasir Aminuddin Degar. The junior Degar brothers, Nasir Zahiruddin and Nasir Fayazuddin Degar. And Wasifuddin, Fariduddin, and Saiduddin Degar. Other leading exponents include the Gundecha brothers, who have received training from some of the Dagars. Leading vocalists outside the Degar lineage include the Malik family of Darbhanga tradition of musicians. Some of the leading exponents of this tradition were Ram Chatur Malik, Siaram Tiwari, and Vidya Malik. At present Prem Kumar Malik, Prashant and Nishant Malik are the Dhrupad vocalists of this tradition. A section of Dhrupad singers of Delhi Gharana from Mughal Emperor Shah Jahan unregistered trademark escort migrated to Bhettiya under the patronage of the Bhettiya Raj, giving rise to the Bhettiya Gharana. Bishnupur Gharana, based in West Bengal, is a key school that has been propagating this style of singing since Mughal times. Khyal. Khyal is a Hindustani form of vocal music, adopted from medieval Persian music and based on Dhrupad. Khyal, literally meaning thought, or imagination in Hindustani and derived from the Arabic term, is unusual as it is based on improvising and expressing emotion. A khyal is a 2 to 8 line lyric set to a melody. The lyric is of an emotional account, possibly from poetic observation. Khyals are also popular for depicting the emotions between two lovers, situations of ethological significance in Hinduism and Islam, or other situations evoking intense feelings. Khyal contains a greater variety of embellishments and ornamentations compared to Dhrupad. Khyal's romanticism has led to it becoming the most popular genre of Hindustani classical music. The importance of the Khyal's content is for the singer to depict, through music in the set raga, the emotional significance of the Khyal. The singer improvises and finds inspiration within the raga to depict the Khyal. The origination of Khyal is controversial, although it is accepted that this style was based on Dhrupad and influenced by outside musical influences. Many argue that Amir Khusrau created the style in the late 16th century. This form was popularized by Mughal Emperor Muhammad Shah, through his court musicians. Some well-known composers of this period were Sadarang, Adarang, and Manrang. Tarana. Another vocal form, Taranas are medium to fast-paced songs that are used to convey a mood of elation and are usually performed towards the end of a concert. They consist of a few lines of poetry with soft syllables or bols set to a tune. The singer uses these few lines as a basis for fast improvisation. The Tilana of Carnatic music is based on the Tarana, although the former is primarily associated with dance. Tapa. Tapa is a form of Indian semi-classical vocal music whose speciality is its rolling pace based on fast, subtle, knotty construction. It originated from the folk songs of the camel riders of Punjab and was developed as a form of classical music by Mian Ulam Nabi Shori or Shori Mian, a court singer for Asaf ud-Dawla, the Nawab of Awadh. Naidi Baba Tapa, or tapas sung by Naidi Babu, were very popular in 18th and 19th century Bengal. Among the living performers of this style are Laxman Pandit, Shanu Kurana, Man Valkar, Jairija Devi, Ishwarchandra Karkar, and Jayant Kot. Thumri. Thumri is a semi-classical vocal form said to have begun in Uttar Pradesh with the court of Nawab Wajid Ali Shah. There are 3 types of Thumri: Purabang, Lucknowi and Punjabi Thumri. The lyrics are typically in a Proto-Hindi language called Brij Bhasha and are usually romantic. Some recent performers of this genre are Abdul Karim Khan, the brothers Barkat Ali Khan and Baidulam Ali Khan, Begum Akhtar, Jairija Devi, Beauty Sharma Barua, Nazakat Salamat Ali Khan, P.T. Ajoy Chakrabarti, Prabhata, Siddheshwari Devi, and Shobha Gurju. Ghazal. In the Indian subcontinent, ghazal became the most common form of poetry in the Urdu language and was popularized by classical poets like Mir Taqi Mir, Ghalib, Da, Zawq and Sauda amongst the North Indian literary elite. Vocal music set to this mode of poetry is popular with multiple variations across Central Asia, the Middle East, as well as other countries and regions of the world. Ghazal exists in multiple variations, including semi-classical, folk and pop forms. Although Hindustani music clearly is focused on the vocal performance, instrumental forms have existed since ancient times. In fact, in recent decades, especially outside South Asia, instrumental Hindustani music is more popular than vocal music, partly due to a somewhat different style and faster tempo, and partly because of a language barrier for the lyrics in vocal music. A number of musical instruments are associated with Hindustani classical music. The Veena, a string instrument, was traditionally regarded as the most important, but few play it today and it has largely been superseded by its cousins the sitar and the sarod, both of which owe their origin to Persian influences. Other plucked or struck string instruments include the sarbaha, sasringa, santur, and various versions of the slide guitar. Among bowed instruments, the sarangi, israj and violin are popular. The banjari, shehnai and harmonium are important wind instruments. In the percussion ensemble, the tabla and the pakhavaj are the most popular. Various other instruments have also been used in varying degrees. Festivals. Among the earliest modern music festivals focusing on Hindustani classical music was the Harbalab Sangeet Sammelan, founded in 1875 in Jalandhar. Dover Lane Music Conference notably debuted in 1952 in Kolkata, while festivals such as the ITCSRA Sangeet Sammelan appeared in the early 1970s. See also: Arabic Maqam, Carnatic music. References. Further reading: Mautel, Patrick. A Comparative Study of Selected Hindustani Ragas. New Delhi, Munshira Monohalal Publishers Private Ltd. ISBN 81-215-0526-7. Mautel, Patrick. Hindustani Ragas Index. New Delhi, Munshira Monohalal Publishers Private Ltd. Bagshay, Sandeep. Nad. BPI Publishers. ISBN 81-86982-07-8. Bagshay, Sandeep. Shruti, A Listener's Guide to Hindustani Music. Rupa. ISBN 81-291-0903-4. External links: Sajanas Rag Hindustani, A Comprehensive Introduction to All the Basic Concepts of Hindustani Classical Music with Relevant Audio-Video Demonstrations and Notations, Hindustani Raga Sangeet Online, ITC Sangeet Research Academy, Basics of Hindustani Classical Music for Listeners, a downloadable PDF, and an online video talk.